Hello and welcome to Three Things to Watch for LSU against Nicholls State on Saturday. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by Chase Robinson. We are Southeastern 16, and you can catch this game either in person or on the pluses, ESPN Plus or SEC Network Plus. I don't know if I get that as a DirecTV guy or anymore. I may not be a DirecTV guy by Saturday. But anyway, I'll be figuring out some way to watch some of it. LSU going to be a huge favorite in this one. Again, 6:30 Central in Baton Rouge. Chase, we'll get into our three keys for this game or three big questions to watch. But first, tell folks who sponsors our channel, please.
Yeah, Bet Online, and they're the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. If you think you know your stuff, you can get in on a $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, head over to the online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker or one of the over 150 slots games. So head over to the website today to get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here.
All right, let's start with the first key, and I think this is by far the biggest one. I think the most frustrating thing when you're a fan of a team or a coach, and we're not that here, we're just two guys looking at it from the outside. But watching that game, I think what had to be frustrating if you're Brian Kelly and LSU, you're thinking, man, if we get beat by the better team, that's easier to swallow. But when you leave the game going, did we beat ourselves? Those are the ones that keep you up at night. You could see his frustration. And if you watch the game, you know what I'm talking about last week when LSU lost to Southern Cal. 10 penalties for 99 yards, but it wasn't just the penalties, the number and the yards. It was the when and how. You had a key play that helped add to the end of the game touchdown drive. You had a celebration penalty or a taunting penalty, I guess it was. I think most of us understand you probably can't make signs that indicate you're gunning down an opponent, but for whatever reason, common sense or messaging or whatever did not get through to some of the LSU players last week. I think if you're an LSU fan, you're going to beat Nicholls State and you're going to beat them decisively, or else we're having an emergency podcast talking about other things. But I think you want to see, okay, just play a clean game. Don't do dumb things. Come out having people feeling better about your discipline.
You know, and I think you said it best there, Chris. It wasn't just the penalties, and yeah, you want to clean those up, but it was the way in which they happened, the penalties themselves, and then when they happened, I think is the question. And that does just show lack of discipline, and because it was in the moments where the game was frustrating, you know, where USC was driving, you know, and when LSU scored. Yeah. So it was those moments that you really need composure if you want to win games, if you want to be in big games. And in situations like LSU hopes they are, where they're going to be in more close game, more big games, you got to be able to keep your composure. That's the sign of a championship winning team. And I didn't see that from LSU. They've got to be more disciplined. The targeting was tough. I mean, that's and so you're going to have a guy out from that this week in the first half of the game, and the celebration penalty uncalled for. And so it's those type things that they have got to do away with if they want to win the games and be in conversations that we think they may be in eventually.
Yeah, and look, next week LSU is going to be favored at South Carolina. I'm going to looking at things now. It's probably under a touchdown because that game is in Columbia. But, we've seen some strange things happen with Shane Beamer in Columbia before. And you don't want to be that team that has those happen to you. And I think if they don't clean things up, they're ripe for an upset maybe in a couple of weeks. But that's a lot of ifs.
Yep.
One thing that unfortunately is not an if is point number 2. And boy, I wish we weren't talking about this one, but some bad news for the Tigers in the midweek to their rushing attack.
Yeah, John Emery, who I don't know if you watched much of the game, Chris, but I was really impressed watching the game. I was like, man, this is a guy we're going to be talking about a lot this year, John Emery. But unfortunately, in practice this week, he goes down ACL, and so he is out. And you hate to see that anytime, but especially for such a great start to the season as he had against USC, I felt like he was really able to get that kind of that spark going offensively towards the end of the game for LSU to try to get things going for a comeback there. But I hate that he has gone down. So now, I mean, you've got to find guys to go to. You've got to find a way to run the football, and we'll see where they go and how they do it. But John Emery was such a bright spot in your opening game of the season. You hate to see him go down, and he was running well against a good USC defense. And so, I mean, that shows too, he's not just wasn't a lucky game for him. No, he was moving well on the USC defense, which was pretty good. And so that's going to be a big miss for LSU this year.
Yeah, and aside from the storyline of what does the rushing attack look like, you just hate it. John Emery came in as the next great thing, and I think there was an academic suspension or something, if I remember, and he kind of gotten lost. I almost forgot he was on the team, and he's looking up at some other tailbacks on the roster and having to compete, and lo and behold, he's out there and probably the guy that looked best. And you root for kids to make the best of a story that doesn't start so well, and for people to realize their potential. And I really hate it for John Emery. I hope he gets a shot and gets healed, whether that's NFL, another year of college, or whatever. But that just was heartbreaking to hear that this week.
It was, and hope the best for him in his recovery for sure.
Well, the third key, let's switch sides of the ball, and I want to see what it looks like with the corners. A guy that I'd kind of circled was Ashton Stamps. LSU's had some elite corners, and Stamps was a guy that played, I guess, kind of as a reserve last year and maybe looked to have a step up into a bigger role. And I thought at times he looked good and made some plays last week, and I think he may have been the kid that gave up the game-winning touchdown pass to. I think he may have been the guy on the coverage. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, please, but that's how I remember watching it. Anyway, I think it's not that you're going to come out if LSU has dominated Nicholls and say, hey, see, everything's fixed, because we're smarter than that. But if they are unfocused and get beat for a couple of touchdowns, okay, that's been a question about the defense for a year or two now. And I think with Blake Baker, we feel like they're better, feel like it looked better against a pretty good Southern Cal offense. But I think you want to see some carryover into the next week, and you don't want to see that be a liability in a game like this.
Right, and I don't know if you watched any of Brian Kelly's press conference, his midweek press conference. He was asked a lot about the cornerback room specifically, on what changes, if there will be any, made, and it sounds like Ashton Stamps and Sage Ryan are taking the majority of the snaps in practice at those positions. PJ Woodland and J.R. Brown are coming in occasionally, but they've got some work to do at corner. And again, Miller Moss was impressive at quarterback for USC, and so he gave them a lot of work in the secondary. But the thing is, for LSU, is they're going to face a lot of good quarterbacks this year. They're going to face the teams who are going to throw it around the yard some, and this secondary's got to be ready for that.
Yeah, and just as an aside, that put a dent in LSU's playoff hopes. No doubt about it. That's one of the games that you really wanted to win. If you win that, maybe you're on the right side of the bubble, if we're doing bubble talk and playoff stuff at this point. But it's not over. I wasn't discouraged. I think one thing you brought up, I think that sometimes the guy that the other quarterback just has a game. I was really impressed with Southern Cal's passing attack. So I don't think it's all gloom and doom. The season's over. Sometimes you give the other guy some credit. The mistakes and things aside, there are opportunities for LSU going forward, but I think you need to start to see some cleanup this week against Nicholls State.
Oh, definitely. And I think this is a good week to do that before you go the rest of the way there. And you'll, again, like you mentioned, be at South Carolina next week. And so this is a good week to clean some of that up.
Well, we'll be here to talk about it afterwards. Best way to get that, hit that subscribe button, enable your notifications, hit the like button. That helps our analytics. And we'll have probably a late Saturday night wrap up on all the games. And we'll be back next week with all kinds of football content, power rankings, predictions, previews, all the stuff we do here. We also cover baseball and basketball year-round. Yeah, literally every week here at the channel with those two sports. So that's another benefit of subscribing, which is free, and we hope you do it. Caroline.smith at Southeastern14.com if you want to advertise. For Chase Robinson, I'm Chris Lee. You're watching Southeastern 16 presented by BetOnline.